All right, welcome back to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet. You should look that up because it's so true. uh we've haven't recorded in a while. Life gets in the way, but we wanted to jump back in with a short video on some things that we've kind of talked around that I wanted to focus on a little more. For instance, we've talked about the difference between a good trainer and a bad trainer. Um, and I wanted to spend a little more time on that for anyone uh, who needs one, wants one. How do you find a good personal trainer or a strength and conditioning coach? Um, and we've mentioned someone who isn't afraid to say I don't know or it depends. Let me research that. Get back to you. So once you've kind of established a relationship, okay, I've got a good one here, or I don't if they're not doing that. Um, but I do think it's difficult picking one in the first place. So I don't know where you first got into training. I know you were at a box gym. So
Hmm.
when I first got in at a box gym, and they said, "Oh, just go to this website and get your certification, and then you can start." I was like, "Okay, that seems a little sketchy, but okay." So I still keep that certification. That's at the top of my folder, so I could show people when I'm talking to them. I'm like, "All right, look, before I get to my real certifications, here's the first one I get. So here's what you should know, even if you don't go with me, about what the training industry is like." I mean, it just took me a couple of hours of class, and then I took a test, and it was done, and it was not difficult. It would have been really easy to just Google every answer if I didn't know it. So it was pretty worthless. It's a pretty worthless piece of paper.
Well, I started a box gym too when we moved here for Nicole's med school. I uprooted everything, so I went back to school as well. And originally, it was going to be physical therapy because I had already had a lot of biochemistry from my original time in school before I dropped out, and it was 24-hour fitness. And they hired me without any prior experience, and they said, "Oh yeah, we'll get you up to speed. We train our trainers." Okay, that's cool. So you go out there for a week, and it's one day of here's some things about training, and then 5 days of sales. And so it really was centered around selling training versus actually training people. But you got your little training certificate. I think it was called Apex is the one they used. And you really didn't even have to take a test. I think we had a little quiz at the end. Uh, you just had to show up every day for this course, and then they put you in the gym and say, "All right, sell." And for the first couple days, you can clock in for it, but after that, you're on your own. And so that was my first experience being thrown into the box gym.
Yeah, and I don't know how often you get this, because you're set up way differently than I am, but w- something I get frequently when I try to sell someone on training is, "Oh, I used a trainer once and they hurt my back." So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, I get that. "Oh, I used a trainer once and I hurt my knee." "Oh, I used." Well, then, yeah, that was not a good trainer.
Those are actually the bulk of my clients.
Hmm.
But it was the hack to the system was I developed a good relationship with the physical therapists in the area and the chiropractors in the area and some of the doctors in the area. So they were already prepped to say uh, that the doctor or the therapist, mostly the therapists and chiropractors, they say, "Oh, you got hurt with this trainer. Well, try this guy," and they give them my card. So that actually is probably the bulk of where my clients came from. Uh, so yeah, that's the kind of the bypass of the system. Now you're not having to convince them that you're different than the other trainers because someone already set you up. And part of that was actually reaching out and training the guys and girls that recommend clients to me. So I trained a lot of physical therapists and chiropractors in my career as well. And some of that was luck of the draw because of where I started working after the box gym, but we'll probably go into that in more detail. But
Yeah, well, and that's something I noticed really quick, just being in a box gym, even before I started working, is most trainers will give you a session to try and sell you. So if you're looking for a trainer, most trainers will give you a session. During that session, pay attention to the questions they asked you. They should ask you, pretty detailed and specific health related questions. If you have any health problems or past injuries, areas of chronic pain and tightness, they should be looking to find that out. And then they should ask good detailed follow-up questions about that so that they can craft a program around that so that they can address that issues. So if they don't do that, there's your first flag right off the bat. The second one would be before they throw you into training, they should do some kind of physical evaluation of you. Rather than just, all right, let's hit the bench press. Like I put mine through basically I start them by teaching them my dynamic warm-up process, right? Because not only do they need to get warmed up, not only do I want to teach them, even if they don't, train with me, I want to teach them how to warm up properly. But through that dynamic warm-up process, you can also see how they're moving. So you can evaluate what their biomechanics are and where their problem areas are, because they almost always have problem areas.
I would say if someone's going by that first session, one of the big tells is there should be some sort of physical evaluation process, not just the questionnaire. They should be doing some sort of movement assessment that identifies let me use the right words. Not necessarily just imbalances, but what the primary issues might be and what could get in the way of actual intense training. Because if they throw you right into the intense training to impress you, then they don't have your best interest in heart. They want the sale, and they don't care about the long-term impact of that. So if there's got to be some sort of evaluation process, and that could take many forms. When I was early in my career and I didn't have the experience I do now, it was more like a traditional FMA, functional movement assessment. Now I've adapted a little bit more. It's more of a casual process now, but it took a lot of experience to be able to develop that, because now I can do a functional warm up like you were just talking about and identify all of those. But I let them know ahead of time, say my warm up is designed for me to evaluate you as a client. And so I say that out loud to them, and I'm going to say, you're going to see me writing a lot, because if I see something that we need to work on, this is where it's going to come out. So I kind of set the stage. So if someone sets the stage like that, and again, it can be a traditional FMA, it could be, I actually didn't mind the eval we did at 24 Hour Fitness. It was okay. I hated the way they sold it, and I hated how the marketing was built around it, but the actual movements were okay. But yeah, as long as they evaluate before they train. And I've developed a system where I can kind of start training while I do that. But again, I express that this is the purpose of this. So might be some weird movements here, or you might feel off balance, or you might feel like you can't do a movement. That's actually okay, because that's just something we need to work on.
Yeah, and obviously, if the trainer's putting you through something like that, they should be there to assist, especially because, like you said, you and I, we're purposely going to try and make someone off balance because we want to see where you have balance and where you don't, because those are issues that need to be addressed.
Well, and let's be careful with the word balance, because it's not just standing on one foot, touching your nose and with your eyes closed. It's how you move. Do you shift your weight properly? Can you lift one leg up to your chest and not the other? And those are kind of a symmetrical balance. But then how's your focus? This is one thing I evaluate with my clients. We talk about the mental aspect. Is their mind on work still, or are they in the moment? Because that's incredibly important.
Yeah. Yeah. So like one of the things I do as part of a warm up is just body weight squats just to get moving. Okay, so if I'm making someone do that for the first time, I'm gonna have them do a bench squat because they've got I can coach their form better if they're over the bench, but then I've got the bench there if they have trouble just doing a basic body weight squat, as well as letting me see what they're doing. And I'll tell them that I'm looking to see, or if I notice they're shifting, because that's one of the things we mean by balance is, okay, well, you feel balanced when you do a squat because you're going up and down and you don't feel like you're going to fall over. Okay, but what I mean by balance is, do you go up and down, vertically, or are you shifting side to side while you're moving?
Yeah, it's not only that. In discussing balance, I think a lot of trainers, and this is kind of speaking to the trainers now, though
Mhm.
it's something to look for, is they confuse that with symmetry. And they see something out of, like, maybe one glute bigger than the other, or one thigh different than the other, whatever form that takes. A lot of your former athletes, especially your throwers and your volleyball players, tend to be kind of built like a corkscrew, depending on which their dominant side, because they've been making an athletic movement with one side for so many years. But there's a big difference between symmetry and balance. I've got a buddy who's 6'4" and I'm 6 foot tall, but if we pick up an ice chest and walk with it that's full, we can do it without spilling, because we're working together in unison. So what I'm looking for is your body working together. Because if I take that volleyball player that played AVA at, 8 years old on through high school and then some college, and maybe even beyond, because I've got one that played beach volleyball for a while after that. And I'm thinking of her in particular because there's such a muscular imbalance between both sides, but that was a 20-year development. And realistically, to change that from a complete symmetry standpoint, you're looking at another 10 to 20 years to balance it out, without weakening the other side. So you can teach somebody to move in unison without having to make them structurally symmetrical. So that so when we're talking about balance, we're talking about every aspect of it. Now, physical balance, again, standing on one leg, is a 3-part thing. It's your inner ear, which we really can't do a whole lot about except say stay hydrated, and I've worked with deaf people, so this is actually a real challenge that you can come across. But the second is the muscular strength to have the balance. And so this is part of my evaluation process. Okay, inner ear, I can't do anything about, so we just do the best we can. Number 2, the muscular strength. Well, you can see that with certain movements. If they can hold a position with no load, but you add a little bit of load and all of a sudden it gets thrown off, well, now you probably have a muscular strength issue. But then the other part is the neurological connection. Is it firing in time? And then you can see that where they go out of position, then pull themselves back into position. Well, that you have to identify, because the more intense the activity or the more fatigue you add, the less likely they're going to be able to pull themselves back into position before they hit a danger zone. They're basically driving down the road and slamming into the guardrails as they go by. So you try to identify those 3 things and then apply that to all the movements. So I don't want to go down too much of a tangent, because
Yeah, that's quite a rabbit hole. I was trying to resist the urge to choke,
yeah,
because that's
that's
quite
more
a
of a
rabbit
talk.
hole.
Yeah, that's more of a talk to other trainers. Now I do have my clients. I explain that to them so they can be conscious of it, because the nervous system and how it works a lot of times starts with a thought, and
Yeah.
and sometimes you can fix a dysfunction just by saying, hey, you're doing this. Your knee slides in when you step on that box. Oh crap, I'll make sure it doesn't do that. And they can. So then you can correct something with a thought. And if you can't, then you just find the proper progression to get there. So
Yeah.
evaluation is the first step. If they're not evaluating right off the bat, if they've got a canned workout that they just throw you through, that's your first sign you have someone who doesn't have your best interest at heart, or doesn't know what they're doing. One of the two.
Right. Um, evaluation and explanation was part of what you were talking about there, which I think is important. And I admit I'm biased because one of the reasons I like to do this is because I like to teach. I like to explain. Okay. And I've had a few clients that were like, one in particular, he owned his own independent pharmacy. So he's a small business owner. He was the head pharmacist. He was at work 10 to 12 hours a day. And he was like, I don't need to know. I'm never going to do this on my own. I come in here because it's the only time of day I've got. So I just need you to do, to get me through this, or I'm not going to stay physically active, because he was so immersed in,
Mhm.
that small business busyness. So I've had people like that, but others I try and teach. I try and explain what I'm doing. So they should explain what they're doing. Uh, if you're going to go off on pet peeves of trainers, I will too. But part of that should be, they should explain to you the program they're going to put you through and why. I've noticed that a lot of trainers seem to treat that like it's, well, first of all, I've noticed there are trainers who don't bother to write that down. They don't actually seem like they have a program. They seem like they're winging it every time.
Checking
And
Instagram
others,
that morning.
yep. What's on Instagram today? What can I find on Reddit? Okay, this looks good. And others treat that program like at the box gym I was at, we had forms that we had, and on part of that form was a an outline section to write out a program. And I would show my clients, okay, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, this is the outline of what we're doing and where we're going. And also because the number one reason people don't stick with fitness goals is because they don't see results.
Mhm.
So even if you're not seeing those results in the mirror, I want to be able to show you, look, these were the exercises we were doing and the weights we were doing before. And now here we're doing more complicated movements with more resistance. You're making progress. Okay. So I feel like there are trainers that treat that like it's top secret because they don't want you to not need them.
Mhm.
I'm like, I want to explain to you what we're doing and why we're doing it. So a trainer should be able to explain to you from the beginning what's going on and why.
Well, the talk I always have, and I've gotten pretty good at doing it while training them.
Mhm.
So, but if you're kind of new at this, uh, you would want to do it separately just so you can focus. But is let's find the things you want to do, what you the wants on your end, and let me evaluate your needs, and then let's try to bring those two together. And I can give you a lot of the things you like, but we have to do these other things too. Or it opens the door for the conversation of, okay, that thing you want to do that you think is cool that you saw on the internet, or you used to be able to do when you were a kid, or that thing that is on your goal list for fun. Well, you can't do that without getting hurt unless we do these things. But these things are going to progress you there, and I guarantee. And
Mhm.
someone says, or someone sees something and they say, I can't do that. I always say, you can't do that yet. You can't do that yet, but you might be able to. So that opens the door for that's a great discussion, because then you can show them the steps along the way. Or when you bring out an exercise that's kind of tedious or awkward, or something that they're not good at right away, which is frustrating, then you can say, hey, this is step 3 on your way to goal X. And then sometimes they throw something at you. Hey, I really love those battle ropes. I see them on there and I have fun every time I do them. Well, guess what? Guess where I want to slide my conditioning moments to? We're going to do those ropes a little bit more often, a little less rower, or something along those lines. So you can kind of try to marry the giving the client what they want versus what they actually need, as long as
Mhm.
you're clear from the beginning. Now it's a tough sell still, because people, we've developed a kind of this thought around fitness that you need to punish yourself for your daily bad habits. And that thought, and plus a little bit of marketing. Biggest Loser was great for the first season, but then after that, it started spreading this not positive message of more more, and more, harder, harder, just showing the last minute workouts, not showing the positive effects that these people are having on their bodies, and just selling it through intensity. And CrossFit did a great job of doing that too. They started with their pyramid of basics and nutrition and foundation on the bottom, and then worked their way up to sport. But then around 1996 or so, they flipped it on its head because sport was selling. And so because sport was selling, well, that's the direction they went. We ended up with the CrossFit Games, and everybody walking into a CrossFit gym thinks they're going to be a games competitor someday, and they think they started taking pride in injuries, and they created mascots around serious conditions like rhabdomyosis, and it had Uncle Pukey. If you puke, that's a status symbol. And like, if you puke, you just lost your nutrients for the day.
Yep. That's amusing. That's exactly where I was going next. Because annoyingly, and it drives me crazy, and I hate myself for it. But I've got a setup in my garage to train myself, train clients to teach Olympic lifts and to coach heavy lifting. But with my condition, and not everyone can do that. So I do have a gym membership for when I need machines to assist me and all that. And I go to Planet Fitness because it's the cheapest around and has the most equipment options for me. And I hate it because I hate their corporate philosophy. It drives me crazy. What really drives me extra crazy now is they actually have a trainer on staff. And I'm like, how can you say no critics if you have a trainer on staff? Because either he's not certified or he should lose his certs, because the point of a good trainer is to critique you, not to criticize you, but to critique you, because he has to, or she has to, because that's part of the process. Okay. And the other thing I hate is their I don't know if they still have it, but they had a connection with The Biggest Loser. They were a sponsor of The Biggest Loser. And a big thing that drives me crazy about that show is this mentality that you have to kill yourself while you're exercising or you're not going to get results.
I had an old post come across my Facebook in memory, and I should have reposted it. It was just kind of ranting, and it was, if you just crushed your clients today, and every time you crush your clients, no, you kill your clients. Every time that you work out with your clients, you kill them. If you just take a step back and start actually training your client, you'd be surprised that they might actually get through that workout without dying next time. And if they're not improving, you're working them for your own ego. Mm-hmm. Here's a good sign if people want to talk about a good trainer. If check their social media, because trainers will post, especially if they've got a business oriented social media, so their training site or their gym site or whatever, and see how many times their face ends up in the video of their client. If it starts like this and then goes to their client and then ends back here, there's your sign right there. It's about them, not you.
Yeah. Well, where I was going is if they're talking about the crushing it and killing it, and then if they're doing that, I mean, watch them, especially if you're going to a box gym and you're looking for a trainer, just watch the trainers and you'll see it. My wife used a trainer for a time because coach husband is a strain on the relationship sometimes. So I got her a trainer to try and just teach her the ropes and get into it. And the first one she had was like that. It was no, to just push, and she felt like crap afterwards. Mm-hmm. Well, luckily that person left, and so she started training with someone else who was okay. You're looking kind of funny. How you feel? And she was always checking with her, and this trainer was like, okay, so you're feeling kind of dizzy. You're not feeling so good. All right, let's change it. Let's do this. Okay, so do they change it up to do they modify based on how you're feeling and how you're doing and what you need? Okay, so that's that's another big indicator, another big red flag if they don't do that. Cause that's back to that where we started of, oh yeah, I used a trainer, but they hurt my back. Okay, well, that's how that happens. Is if you're in that mentality of just push, push, push instead of, okay, well, stop that. Let's do this instead, you know?
Well, and that's the great thing, because you can ultimately get to push, push, push.
Hmm.
Or you can find ways to push, push, push. So when I do conditioning with my clients, because it's important, especially if body composition is your goal, the more fatigue I am going to induce, the more simple I make the training. So if I'm going to go just balls out Tabata style training, we're gonna do something like hit the rower for 20s and 10s, or hit a battle rope and plank combo or something like that. There's no complexity to it, so there's very little room for error to hurt yourself. And so I can just completely leave somebody in a sweaty ball on the ground that ultimately they can recover from without hurting them. Versus here's a good one that someone broke their back with here in town: burpees that jump over a barbell and then turn around, do another burpee, jump over the barbell. I don't know what they officially call that, but well, one jump didn't go as far as it was supposed to, landed on the bar, which is round and spins. So their feet went this way and the back went straight onto the bar.
Ow.
Like that. Broke their back. And what's another one that happened here? Oh, they had a CrossFit Games in one of the parking lots here, and it was a regional event. So it was actually a pointed event where you could get your points to go on to the bigger shows. And one of the workouts, and I might not have this 100% correct, but it was, I think, power cleans, then deadlifts, then what they call toes to bar, which is a hanging leg raise where you touch your toes to your hands. And so you're basically inverted. So power clean first, grip component for 10 reps, deadlifts, grip component for 20 reps, toes to bar for 30 reps. Now you're going upside down when you just blasted your grip 3 exercises in a row. And of course, on this 8-foot bar you have to jump up to do your leg raises, someone went over inverted and fell off because they lost their grip, landed right on the back of their head and neck on the concrete because it was being done in a parking lot. Needless to say, they haven't had the games there since then. I'm pretty sure there was a lawsuit or something out of that.
Well, that's ridiculous.
But yeah, so the main point is the more I'm going to push somebody, the less room for injury I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to have someone destroy their legs and then sprint full speed on concrete, because then they're going to face plant and lose their teeth, which also somebody else in the area did. So,
right. So, and it might not look like you're working hard because it's simple. But if it's a good trainer, they know how to manipulate that. So for instance, you talked about simplicity, and when I had elderly or very obese clients, one of my favorite tools was to have them lie flat on the ground, because I could do more with that. I could have them do things like bridging presses or pullovers, things like that. So I could do a lot of upper body work, having them lie flat on the ground. I could circuit it. I could do something more intense because I'm not worried about them falling. I'm not worried about them doing something that's going to hurt themselves. I'm not worried as much about them straining their back because they're so supported. So, and then take a second, catch your breath, let your blood settle, and let me help you up. Okay.
Well, and that's good with balance issues too, because a lot of people think balance training, and again, now we're talking your equilibrium type balance. A lot of people think that standing on a Bosu ball or balancing on one leg on a wobble board, and that's how you work it. No, you actually connect to the ground first. So if I have someone that's got a serious balance issue, we start on all fours. And then we lift one appendage, whether it's a foot or a hand, until they can do that with complete stability. Then we lift 2, could be a quadruped opposite raise where they lift the leg and the arm, and what people call bird dogs. And we work from the floor up, and we work on that mind-body connection to feeling the floor, not just the muscles in your body. So make them go barefoot, feel the ground. Of course, in a box gym, probably, I don't know if there's rules against that, but I have the freedom to do that. So, they can go barefoot, start feeling the ground, start working on that connection all the way down the line of their body to the floor. Because we've lost that. We're in shoes on concrete every day. So people have lost the connection to the ground. It's so important. So starting people on the ground is actually the best way to start their balance training, and then work them up till they're on one foot, balancing on a box or something.
Yeah, if you've ever had a minor surgery, I had my left knee scoped to clean up some gunk in my meniscus. And the first thing the physical therapist had me do was just flex my quad. It's like, okay, flex your quad. Well, that's easy. I said flex your quad, and I looked down and it wasn't doing anything.
Yeah.
Right.
So even to take that cue a little further is flex your quad and feel it.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's where we started from before we progressed to eventually just standing on that left leg flat on the floor, just on that leg, to eventually standing, on a balance board on that left leg. So but it started from just flex it, So you've got to start basic. Does a trainer start basic and work up, or just try and kill you? And are they adjusting it? I mean, those are my keys for looking. I don't know if you have anything more to add.
Well, it's the first principle of training. First principle of training is progressive overload. And we have to overload the system to make it adapt. If you're doing the same thing you do every day, your body's just going to be the way it always is. So we do have to overload the system, and we use this word before, discomfort. Get to a point of discomfort, and then progressively have a progression to that overload, whether that's a more difficult movement, more weight, more time for endurance work, more demanding on your nervous system if it's a balance issue. So as long as there is a start point that is doable but slightly uncomfortable, and then you keep in that discomfort by just slightly progressively moving forward, and that can take many different timelines depending on how good you are as an athlete, or if it's something you're relearning versus having learned for the first time, or you've had a bad habit for a long time. So again, that balance issue, if you have a habit where you shift every time you move and you've been doing it for 40 years, it's going to take a little time to correct that. So as long as that trainer, make sure they're writing stuff down. There's another clue from the outside looking in. If they're not writing stuff down, if they don't have that progression on paper in some way, shape, or form, or on a computer in some way, shape, or form, then they don't have a plan for you. I think that's enough on that one. So progressive overload, individuality is another principle. We kind of broke these down a little bit, but if your trainer that you're hiring overuses the word everybody's different, run and hide. Because we are all different, but the differences are, it's kind of like our genetics. You and I are not related, so we're completely we're considered 100% different genetically, but that 100% is past what makes us human. We're actually 98% or 99 point something percent alike. But that point something is what you're talking about with 100, because that's what makes us an individual. But we're still humans. So the training program should start from human up to the individual. And then you can account for things like your injury, or my heart condition, or someone's different goals. Different goals is where the individuality comes in. Different preferences is where the individuality comes in, which we addressed earlier. Those are where individual comes in. But if someone, just to justify why they did something weird, they say, oh, everybody's different, that's a red flag. Specificity is another principle of training. But again, the red flag is such and such specific training. And it's completely different because you do this. No, it shouldn't be completely different, because again, we're all human up to a certain point. Where it does get different, and this is where goals come in. If you come to me and you say, I want to do a stage bikini competition. Well, now we're getting a little bit more specific in goal. and there's trade-offs involved. And this is where, the good trainer on that is, I will tell you where the trade-offs are. And are you still good with that goal? Because at some point, health is going to not be the primary focus. Someone else comes in and says, I can deadlift 300 pounds. And I think if I train right, I can do a powerlifting competition, which would have to get up to about 600 or 700 pounds at any given body weight. And you say, well, okay, well, we can do that, but you're going to sacrifice a lot of things along the way. And it's going to be your conditioning, you're going to have to gain some weight, all of these things along the way. So if I can explain the trade-offs, not just the benefits, then you can make a more informed decision on whether you want to continue with that goal. And that's fine. We all do things. I mean, not everything on your bucket list is for your overall health when you're 80 years old.
Right. That's I think another good one to probably end on here is, and I think a lot of the things we've talked about here is your trainer honest with you, or potential trainer honest with you? So that's an interesting one to bring up, because I had a client that was like that. She worked at a Hooters. She had gotten into their, the local calendar, and she was trying to work her way up because they do, these bikini competitions and calendars and whatnot. She said, that's what I want to do, is I'm trying to improve my body to work up through that. And I said, okay, well, we can do that. And then she showed me a picture of an Instagram butt model, fitness model of, okay, this is what I'm trying to look like. And I had to be honest with her of, okay, well, I can't do that. You can't do that, not without like butt injections or something, because she had a very petite frame. So it's like, okay, we can add volume, we can add muscle so that we can add shape, but you can't look like that because her body type is completely different from yours. Okay. So here's what we can do. And if I was completely focused on the sale, like other trainers, then I would have given her some BS. But I was focused on, her health, like you said, the trade-offs of, okay, well, this is going to require these things, but then also just the honesty of, these are the results we can get. These are the results you're going to be looking for. I don't want to promise you something that you can't get.
Yeah, I trained a gal for a bikini shoot one time, and she was already really, really physically fit, and it was just that little last bit, and I was like, okay, well, here's what the last couple weeks are going to look like, and
not fun.
It's not going to be fun, and don't take it out on me. And she made it all the way till the last week before she started being crabby with me, but it was that final cut week, and it was an experience, but she made it through. So, but she knew ahead of time what sacrifices she was going to have to make along the way. I've got a friend, I'm not training her, but I do have a friend that's training for bikini competition, and she's 5 weeks out, I think. So it's starting to get really, really, really strict, and it's taxing. And so that, as long as you're the professional can explain those trade-offs, they'll if they can explain it, they also know how to deal with it when they come, when it's happening. I really didn't get too hardcore as far as mentally with the person I was training in the last couple of weeks, because I knew she was already mentally stressed from just the diet and the training protocol in and of itself. So the same thing with any sport. When your athletes are making that final run right before training camp or something, which is the hardest part of it, then they're going to be physically stressed, and then you can start shifting your focus to, okay, now I need you to eat this after this training session. I need you to be sleeping properly. Did you sleep properly, or did you go out and party? And so you can shift your focus too.
And that's back to, I mean, what we mentioned earlier about the push is, if they can explain to you what they're doing, how it's going to work, what the trade-offs are, and all that, then they can push you to a specific difficult goal like that without hurting you.
Well, I thought my biggest problem going into training was to counteract laziness, but it actually is the least of my problems.
Mm-hmm.
Once people have the proper motivation, they're actually going to overwork for the most part. I spend more time teaching people to relax than I do teaching them to work hard. The hard work, it happens. You know, if you've got to get X, Y, Z done today and it's all demanding work, then it happens if you do X, Y, Z. If you didn't do it, then you didn't do your work. But when people, they're high strung or they're moving too fast or they're high anxiety about the situation, about being at the gym, about working hard enough, and about getting that sweat to the proper level, about burning, you know, then I've actually had the biggest success by pulling people back from that a little bit. Like, here, no, let's focus on this exercise. Let's relax a little bit. You're too tense right now. You're not going to be able to move properly if you're that tense. That type A personality. Pull people back from that. And if you want to know if someone's type A, help them move. If they're walking with their legs stiff and everything because it's stressful, and that's the kind of personality I'm talking about. Relax for a minute. Let's get in the moment. Let's look at the achievement you just had. So that I actually spend more time doing that, and it's been the biggest success because all of a sudden these people that are hurt all the time are able to train for a long period of time without any setbacks because they're not over anxious or high strung about the situation.
I think that's a good lead into the second topic I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
Which is gym rules, I guess, or
etiquette.
What no. What was the term I came up? I don't remember.
Did you send it in the text last night?
Yeah. Hard rules of things to never do. Okay, because we've talked about well, it depends, you know. So but I do think there are some things you should never do. So for instance, when it comes to depends, I'm old. So when one of those things of it depends, I tell most people you really shouldn't be you shouldn't do working sets with a glute band. Okay. And the reason I tell most people that is because they're not ready for it. So we've mentioned Bret Contreras is one of our go-tos of someone we trust. And you'll see in his videos, I recommend to people you go and look at his YouTube channel, and you'll see him having people doing working sets. And what I mean by working sets is, I mean, weight resistance that is pushing you to failure. This isn't a warm-up set. This isn't an endurance set.
Hitting you in that right amount of uncomfortable.
Exactly.
That's going to get the benefit. Yeah. Because the warm-up sets aren't really they'll give you some volume, but they're not going to get you to that stress level for your body that causes it to adapt.
Right. So you'll get on there and you'll see this, 100 and nothing pound woman doing 185 pounds of barbell hip thrust with a glute band on. All right. Well, that's a professional model that he's been training for months, if not years, and her form is perfect. Okay. The reason I have a big problem with glute bands is one is you mentioned in one of our previous videos about dose response. You're overloading your glutes so that you're not going to get the result you want, because you are. I mean, there are a handful of people I see literally walking around the gym with the glute band on. They never take it off. The other problem I have with it is the entire point of that band is to pull your legs in so that you're forced to push them out, right? So that you work those abductor muscles and push out. Okay, well, if you don't have the mental connection to know what you're supposed to do and when you're not doing it, or if you don't have the physical fitness to hold that position, all that band is doing is training you to do something improperly. because it's pulling your legs in while you're putting them under a load, whether it's a squat or a hip thrust or a deadlift. So when your legs need to be like this, and that knee needs to be tracking with the toe, instead that knee's doing this, and that's going to put a lot of strain on your joints. So that's one of those things that drive me crazy, but it depends.
Well, I was
It's
going to say, this is why I hate absolutes, because there is a
Mhm.
big depends on there. You know,
Yes.
can this person control that movement? Because if they can do the hip thrust with the band on without their knees tracking in, well, great. They're going to have a great benefit from that. And well, here's the other, it depends. What am I training them for?
Mhm.
So if I'm training them for maybe hypertrophy, muscle building, well, that's great, because I can work the external rotators, the abductors, and the glute, the linear thrust of the glute at the same time, and get a triple effect. So that's great. But if I'm training an athlete to have explosive force in a linear direction, so maybe a sprinter, or then, well, I need them to be able to track without some external stimulus. I need
Mhm.
them to be able to track. But again, that same athlete that I need to be able to track, if their problem is weakness in the external rotators under load, then we want to do that for a while because it's going to strengthen them. So there's a lot of it depends that goes on there. And that's why I hate absolutes. My biggest one is that for some reason, everybody wants to poop on dips as an exercise. Oh, dips are bad. And every time I see dips are bad, I go on to read about an improperly done dip. It's like, well, that's it. Yeah, improperly done, almost any exercise is bad. An improperly done squat is going to hurt your back and knees. An improperly done dip is going to hurt your shoulders. Yes. But also, if you can't do a proper dip, that tells me a lot about your body that we need to work on. So that's why I hate poop. There is, I'm trying to think of absolute rules.
Well, and that's why I use the glute banded as an example of, that's one of those things that I will say when I explain it, I'll say, as a general rule, never use a glute band while doing working sets. Okay, that's how I phrase that, because there are exceptions to that. There are
But
times
again,
when
it depends is what's the goal of the working set. Yeah.
exactly. What's the goal of the working set, and what's your fitness level? Okay, but something I've
Well,
noticed.
here's your rule. Here's your absolute rule. Don't use the glute band on your working sets if you can't keep the knee tracked out.
Yes.
So there,
What,
you just qualify it all the way till it becomes something.
well, that's leading me to the first absolute I had, which was, if you can't do an exercise, don't do it. Okay, figure out what you need to do to work your way to that, to being able to do that. If you can, you might not be able to, for whatever reason, because of injury, because of some sort of underlying health condition. You might not be able to do a particular exercise, but figure out what you need to do to work your way to that. So like the glute bend, if your knee needs to be tracking in line with your toes, okay, is what we mean by that. So if your knees are doing this when you're doing a deadlift or squat or hip thrust, you're not doing it properly, you're going to hurt yourself. You need to figure out what you need to do to strengthen those stabilizers, those stabilizing muscles, so that you can, and it may just be a mental thing. It may just be you need to look
Like
in
I
the
said,
mirror.
yeah, you do this when you do that, and they go, oh, okay, and they fix it. Yeah.
It may just need to be, you need to look in the mirror and pay attention to, what are my knees doing while I'm doing this lift? Okay. Another one I've noticed is, and I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this without sounding like the creepy old guy who's checking girls out at the gym, because I look at everybody. I can't help myself. I look at people, I notice things, and I notice biomechanics, because this is just, I'm obsessed and immersed in this crap. So I can't just go to the gym and be at the gym. It's annoying. Um, but there are a few people I've noticed who, frankly, they have great booties aesthetically, and they can actually push weight. So there's a couple in particular I'm thinking of who they'll get on the barbell hip thrust, and they're not they're fairly small women, but they're pushing 185, sometimes 225 pounds on barbell hip thrust. And then they'll go and they'll do a Bulgarian squat, which for anyone who doesn't know, the Bulgarian is where you've got one foot flat on the floor and you've got your back foot propped up on a bench. Well, this is a really difficult exercise because it requires a lot of balance, right? It also requires some good hip mobility because that back leg, those hip flexors are getting stretched out, and it's kind of an uncomfortable position. And then the working leg has to stabilize a lot. So if you're going down on the barbell hip thrust and you've got good form, you're not feeling pain in your back or your knees, you're pushing good weight, but then you go over on and do a Bulgarian squat, and I see you doing this like crazy, you need to stop doing a Bulgarian squat and you need to think about, okay, why do I have no balance? Because I've got good strength in my glutes to do this. Why can't I stand on one leg and work it?
Well, again, that goes back to there's so many aspects to balance. So 2 feet on the ground is completely different, even from the brain down. Neural inhibition is a term, and so your body will prevent you from creating a force, a great force, if you feel unstable in some way. And so so say you have a stability issue in your shoulder, well, you might not be able to bench press a lot, even if you don't feel any pain, or you can't even feel why you can't bench press a lot, but just for some reason at a certain point, it just seems like you just can't push anymore. It's not burning. Doesn't feel like a stretch on the muscle or anything. Your body just won't push. Well, because of that underlying instability, your brain shuts off those nerves to keep it from hurting itself. And that's a good thing. Neural inhibition is a good thing. Because here's a good example. Here's a great example using an extreme. Everybody's heard of Granny that picked up the car to save the kid. You know, the actual true stories of a similar situation. But what they don't tell you about that situation is she popped every tendon in her body, because normally your body would shut off when it felt the stretch of that tendon or the connective tissue around the muscle and the tension that's involved with it, because you got two sensors in your muscles, the muscle spindles and the Golgi tendons, and they work in unison. One measures the stretch of the muscle, the other measures the tension on the muscle. And if either one of those have alarm bells, the brain shuts off the contraction of the muscle. And that's a good thing, or would be ripping muscles all the time. Sometimes when you lose your balance or your strength and you've plopped down because you were doing something on one leg, it's because your body said, I'm going to hurt something if I keep holding this position. So we're just bailing. It's like me skiing. Oh, I'm out of control. I just go down. So it's a good stop balance, but at the same time, it's something that we need to be training if you want to be able to generate more force.
Right.
Or if you need to stand on one leg for a Bulgarian squat. Now, what these people might also be suffering from is they may be just increasing the intensity too much. So she's holding dumbbells. She might be able to stabilize her leg with just 10 pounds less dumbbell in her hands.
Exactly. Or stop, figure it out, and do it. Don't figure out how to do it properly. And if you can't, then figure out what supplemental exercises you need to do to be able to do it properly. So for instance, I do on my supplemental days, I do a single leg RDLs. I can't do a single leg RDL properly. I have to reach a hand out and hold on to something. Then I can do it. Okay. I would like to be able to do it just freestanding. I can't. I've got too much tightness in my hips and I've got a wonky knee. So I have to reach out and hold on to something. That allows me to do it so that hopefully as I train that movement and as I strengthen those gimpy muscles, then I'm hoping that in a few weeks I'll get back to being able to do it.
Well, and that's the proper progression too, because I told you points of contact. You know, pick one foot up, pick one hand up. Well, that's just adding a point of contact, only you're doing it in an upright position because you have a rack or whatever you're using to stabilize. And that's fine. It's better to do the movement properly than to force a movement and be falling all over the place.
Right.
And that's one of the big pullback moments I have with clients is you're falling when we're trying to do this exercise. And it was more common when I did more group classes because the exercise was what it was. People were coming into a group and it was kind of a common denominator situation where, well, single leg RDLs are on the board because most people can do them, but I got this one person that struggles. Okay, you go over to the rack and do it because I need your hips level. I need you not falling all over the place. That fall did nothing for your balance, but reinforce your pattern of falling.
Yep.
And so you could progress this specific to your exercise. You grab the rack, then you loosely grab the rack. Then you just put like 3 fingers on the rack, two fingers and a thumb.
And then I've just got the hand there just in case I need it.
Yeah, and then you just have the hand there just in case you need it, and work all the way. So everything's progressible. Single leg RDLs is a special one in my heart because I did a project in grad school that still pisses me off to this day, because we were supposed to write a 24-week program for an athlete. And in my program, one of the red marks I got was I had heavy single leg RDLs on there because I actually think they're useful as a training tool if you have the right athlete. And it was crossed out. And Gene Coleman says, no athlete can do 5 rep max single leg RDLs. It's too unstable. You wouldn't get good work. And I replied back with, maybe your athletes, which wasn't the right answer. And so I got such a low grade on that project that it was, I always have good test scores because I'm just a decent test taker, but I had almost perfect test and quiz scores, and the project grade was so low, it dropped me down a letter grade. And so it was my only B in grad school. So this still irks me to this day. So I trained single leg RDLs specifically till I was doing barbell single leg RDLs with 225, 2 plates for everybody out there. So more than a lot of people can squat, I was doing one-legged RDLs with it. And I took a video and I sent it to them and I never got a reply. But maybe your athletes was not the right answer to get a better grade on that, but
no, well, it was the right answer. It was not the right answer. That's back to depends.
yeah.
It's the right answer, but not if your goal is to get a better grade.
Not when your professor has been one of the top strength and conditioning coaches in baseball for the last 30 years. And he does know his stuff very well. In fact, training the power pitcher is probably one of the best training. It's 3 or 4 pages, and it's one of the best training manuals of all time. But at the same time, I should have called my losses. I was right, but sometimes it's better to be polite than right.
Right. Forgot what I had a transition here. I don't remember what. So I'll just say that another absolute rule I have of things I see that drives me nuts, and I don't know why people can persist in doing this, because it's not hard to find not even, and I'm not talking about the textbooks I have on my shelf here. I mean just websites. Well, it's over there. Like just like bodybuilding.com, and you'll usually easily find articles that tell you don't do this, and yet I still see people persisting in doing behind the back presses and pull downs, or behind the neck. That's a hard and fast rule. Never ever do that. Why are you doing that? Stop that.
See, I've had athletes that I could do that with because they had amazing shoulders. It's a pretty much never do rule.
Okay.
But if they have amazingly mobile shoulders, stable and mobile shoulders, it can hit the delts really well. And so if they want to have a goal of, if they have that first criteria of great shoulders for the job, they can have control in that extreme position. And the goal is bodybuilding. Well, yeah, that's a great tool. So
I have trouble envisioning how you could have, even with enough shoulder mobility, be able to keep the neck neutral during that movement. Because that's the thing I see, that besides the fact that you're cranking awkwardly on your shoulders. So what you're doing when you're doing that is you're cranking awkwardly on the shoulders. And because you don't have the thoracic mobility, you're arching back, and then you're looking down. So your entire spine is just completely out of whack when you're doing that movement. And that's why I say, don't do it.
Well, you kind of have a little bit of dissonance on this one because of your own cervical spine issues. So this is we all have that trap door. The other part is it's similar to in front. You have to clear the head and then you go to neutral again.
Right.
So you just clear the head and go to neutral. So you end up in the exact same position. It's just a little bit different stimulus on the deltoids. But again, you have to have someone whose shoulders are good enough that the lift is done with the deltoids. The neck isn't as big an issue if again, improperly done, right? So if the traps are contracting to lift the weight, the neck's a big issue. Or even underneath that, the levator, scapula, or some of those others. But if your serratus are elevating your scaps and the deltoids are elevating your humerus, well, now we got a completely different situation. So proper shoulder mobility, proper load, and then focus on the movement, and you can do something like that. Again, risk reward is a huge thing. So I don't, unless someone just completely insists on it. And then again, there's the trade-offs to say, well, we got to get to this point. You don't have the shoulder mobility for that without hurting yourself. But risk reward, generally, I don't do that. But again, I can't put it on an absolute list because you could have a situation where it's perfectly fine. Now, I would say I would put money that the people you see doing that in the gym don't have all those other criteria.
I have never seen someone able to do that. So I used to be able. I used to be able to go from a heavy overhead press to dropping it on my back to then go into a Bulgarian squat. So when I was stronger and more mobile, I could do that. But I would only do that one rep of going from here to drop it down, and then I would rack it. So it was really just half a rep to go to there. And I could do it controlled enough to where I felt like I wasn't going to hurt myself. But I wouldn't do reps like that. Even when I thought I had the shoulder strength to do it.
Here's an absolute rule. Here's an absolute rule. I'll give you an absolute rule. Don't do a max effort anything. That could be the fastest sprint you could do. That could be the longest run you can do. That could be the most weight you could do. It can even be your 100% 10 rep max. So I'm not saying just your 1 rep max, but max effort where you're going to failure at the end. Don't do a max effort anything if your mind's not in it. If your mind is somewhere else because of stress of life or any reason, if your mind's not focused on the task, leave a little on the table. Do your 12 rep instead of your 10 rep for 10 reps. Do, sprint at 90%. If your mind's not completely on the task, then don't go max effort. There's my absolute.
That's a good one because max effort, that's what you were just talking about with the with those nerve connections and shutting things down, is if you're trying to push yourself past to push yourself to your absolute limit and you're not focusing on it, you're probably going to do something wrong. You're probably going to let that form slip, and then you're in trouble. Okay, so you've just made me think of my own of another hard rule that's probably better than what I was going to say, because another one of mine is upright rows, which I used to do a lot of, and you got me to stop doing them. And if you, and one of the things that kind of peeves me about them is like you can find articles, like whole articles dedicated to the upright row on places like T Nation or bodybuilding.com or whatever. And every one of them will say by reputable people of the upright row is dangerous because. So here are some modifications to make it less dangerous. And my thought is, well, just don't do it. You don't need it. Just don't do it. There are other ways around it, but there's a reason people do it, which is So that movement here, that's hitting the delt all the way around, plus it's engaging the traps. And so like
it is a great, it's a great movement for, I hate to
great.
use the word targeting because nothing's ever
Yeah.
on an island, but for yeah, well, we use the word targeting the deltoids, which especially if your goal is kind of in that fitness model route, or if you want that type of body because you saw it in a magazine, because the aesthetics of just a slightly wider shoulder makes the waist look narrower, and if you add good glutes to that, then you get that nice hourglass.
Yeah, it is a great bodybuilding movement. So if you look at someone like Terry Crews, who's got huge delts and traps, right? And he does, if you watch his workouts, he does a lot of upright rows, right? So it's a great bodybuilding movement. But I don't like them anymore because of shoulder and neck health, and not just my own, but people in general. So I think a better rule is evaluate the risk reward on everything you're doing. And unless you have a specific goal, always err on the side of health. Right. So if I just cared more about building my traps and my shoulders back up so they looked better, I'd be doing upright rows on that shoulder day. I don't. I do rotating presses, or what are called Arnold presses.
Arnold presses, yeah.
Because you can still get all around that deltoid pretty good. Plus you're adding some mobility into it to help out, and it's protecting my shoulder while it's working it. So that's the risk reward. Every movement has a risk reward to it. You know, right? As we've said, squats don't hurt your knees, improper squats hurt your knees, but you could still hurt them. There's a risk there that you could do it improperly and you'll hurt yourself. So what's the risk?
Everything that's good for something is also potentially harmful, because you are the goal is to stress the body to improve. But if you're stressing the body in a certain direction, the improvement is to prevent you from being hurt in that direction. So if you're doing, you know, something that strengthens the lower back, well, if you do it just too much, then you hit that breaking point. You're taking it close to that breaking point. The bone remodeling is a great visualization of this. The reason astronauts lose bone mass, or you lose bone mass in a sleep study or something like that, is because you're not stressing the bone at all, which we do every day just walking in gravity. That's why the astronauts lose theirs, because no matter what they're doing up there with bands and everything, it's not the same as just being present in gravity for 24 hours a day. And so that stress of the bone causes it to remodel to handle the stress. And that's the same all across your body. It's just, that's a very clear example of that. So it's like your Thai boxers that have incredibly strong shins, well, that's because they keep stressing that shin in that direction, where the shin bone is made to handle stress in a straight up and down pattern. Well, they're stressing it in a lateral pattern as well. And they're more apt to, if you've never gone shin to shin with a real Thai boxer, you have not experienced life. That is miserable. I hated leg kicks, and it was miserable every time I did it, no matter how strong my shins got. But as a wrestler turned mixed martial artist, my shins were not conditioned like a Thai boxer turned mixed martial artist. And it's like kicking rebar. It's miserable, and I hated it. That's why I did the eat one kick and go for the takedown technique, because I would rather eat one and go for the takedown than let them kick my legs for 3-minute rounds. But it remodels to the stress, and it takes time. And so everything we do is like that. So the muscle, the nervous system, all of that as well. So where were we going with that?
Risk reward. So is there a different exercise you could do that has less risks and maybe less reward, but not less enough that it's not worth doing?
Well,
right.
And that's a lot. So the upright row is a good example, because it does have a decent reward. But for most people, I'm going to use most instead of all, most people, the risk to it is very subtle. So you don't see it coming. You don't feel it coming. You get a slight shift of the humerus in the glenohumeral joint, and that slight shift pinches the rotator cuff on top of it. And just a little bit at a time, pinch, 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 and then until over time you have impingement syndrome. So it's a tricky one, and it's a commonly overdone one because you can't feel the damage you're doing along the way. Now I use it. I actually use it more often because I think we had that discussion a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I was actually more into absolutes back then because I was a young coach and I was dumb. So, you actually stray from absolutes the more wisdom you gain. And experience is the best.
I think that's a general rule with anything.
Yeah. Experience creates wisdom. You can have all the intelligence in the world, but you need the experience. And so I do use them more often, but I don't use them consistently with any one person. So variety is one of my tools. So variety, another principle of fitness, variety is one of my tools to create more volume, because I want my people to be able to do a lot of good, hard work. And so we work on the basics constantly. We work on the big movements constantly. But for something that can be over patterned like an upright row, I am not going to do consistently because it's that over patterning that causes the damage. But I will use that in conjunction with lateral raises, with rear delt raises, with your Arnold presses, with regular overhead presses. I will use them all in conjunction to create a higher volume using variety, because they're a slightly different stress along the way. And they all have different risk rewards. The rewards are all connected, but the risks are all slightly different enough that I could have you do 3 sets of this and 3 sets of this. Whereas if I'd had 6 sets of one thing, it would hurt you. And so using those things as a tool and eliminating the absolutes in your mind actually create a better environment where you can get more good work done. My next rule: when you've reached frustration, step back. Again, any task, if you hit a state of mental frustration, step back, whether that's for 5 minutes, an hour, however long it takes for you to not be frustrated anymore. Because once you've hit that, now you're increasing the risk to everything you do. Frustration will mess you up in so many ways. It's good mentally for motivation, but you need to get out of the moment. So you need to let it settle down and then motivate you for the next set. It's not motivation in the moment. Is that a good one?
No, that's a good one, and I fall prey to that quite often.
We all do. That's where a good coach comes in, because I can watch somebody and know their frustration cues and say, step back, come here. Let's do something different for a while. We're still going to get good work done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, heck, I mentioned RDLs, and I was doing that to myself the other day. I was trying to push myself to make myself do some reps unsupported. And I was getting mad, and if I'd had a trainer there, if I'd had you there, you would have made me stop, because I mean, you could see it. Eventually you could hear it of my, because I was getting mad that I was losing my balance, and I kept trying to push through instead of just, hold on, stop that, relax, do it right. It's a process, and sometimes you have to just. That's something I have to tell myself over and over again, because it's one thing to know it intellectually. It's another to accept it emotionally, because I can tell myself all I want. It's a process, but it's still frustrating as heck in the moment that you're here and not there.
Yeah.
And that obviously applies to more than just fitness. One of Peterson's rules is, don't compare yourself to who someone else is today, but to who you were yesterday. Right. Because in anything that will get you frustrated is look at the progression.
I recently started playing golf.
Because you're old.
No, well, I put it off for a long time because I said I won't do it, because I know the skill level involved. and nobody just comes out the gate good. Even if your coach says, wow, you started off better than most, you're still only actually even hitting the ball 1 every 3 times you swing at it. And then 1 every 20, it goes anywhere near the direction you want it to. And that's when they're like, wow, you picked this up fast. So yeah, I'm having to take that mental, you just want to keep swinging, and it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And you keep knocking up more dirt, which I'm assuming the driving range doesn't like, because there's a lot of divots they got to fix now. But yeah, frustration just makes things worse. It's the moment. Frustration is the moment in time where you start. So the environment's always trying to bring you down. Nature is always trying to kill you. The environment is always trying to bring you down, because otherwise it wouldn't be challenging. So whatever your task is, if you're trying to do a heavy deadlift that's close to your max, that weight is resisting you doing that task. But when you hit the moment of frustration, you assist the weight. You start working against yourself. So it's when you become your enemy as well as the environment. So that's a golden rule for me. Of course, I think all my absolute rules are mental.
Yeah.
Because your body, the sky's the limit. At some point, watch Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah.
You'll see exactly what the human body can actually do.
It's freakish.
It's very freakish. Or watch Olympic lifting. If you want to see little dudes pushing a lot of weight, or even the females, the smallest medalist in the last Summer Olympics was a 92-pound Korean girl, got a bronze medal, and she clean and jerked more than I can. So it's the smallest medalist in the Olympics is stronger than any of us. So
the only other hard rule I can think of is and this touches what we talked about with trainers, is keep a log. Don't do the same thing over and over and over. So you should be keeping your own log if you're training yourself, so that you can see what's working, what's not, and to help remind yourself, hey, I've been doing the same workout for the past 6 months. I should change it up.
yeah, not only that, but you also keep track of your progression. So you got to see where you stopped improving, because sometimes it could be more subtle than you would think. I keep track of my biggest measure for my clients is what's called volume load, and that's sets times reps times weight. So with at least the main lifts, not necessarily all the supplemental lifts, but with at least the main lifts, I keep track of what the total poundage was for that specific type of exercise. And so when you repeat a program, so I do a lot of nuanced stuff, but let me do kind of a basic thing. I'll do 4 weeks of kind of high rep, 4 weeks of moderate rep, 4 weeks of low rep, repeat. And if I repeat the exact same lightweight training cycle that I did the first time, then I have a number. So their 4 sets of 15 RDLs, which is miserable, by the way, their 4 sets of 15 was, say, 100 pounds. So 1,500 pounds per set, right? Am I doing the math right? Yeah, 1,500 pounds. So the next time around, they did over the 4 sets. So it went 95, 100 pounds, 105, 110, and you have a total poundage at the end. So then the next time around, I see how much they've improved over those 4 sets by taking the total sets, reps, and weight. So if they did 1,500 pounds one time, and the next time around they did 1,700 pounds, that's total work done. And of course, assuming range of motion is constant. So range of motion is constant, 1,700 pounds. and their goal is to lose some body fat. Well, you just did 200 extra pounds in the same workout. So we've got a constant improvement. So I don't need their 1 rep RDL to be the ultimate measure. I need more work over time. And so my number one measuring stick for my general fitness clients is volume load, because it's more work done in that hour. And that's improvement. That's the number one source of improvement I'm looking for. Then that's over time. Obviously, if you've got a client that can't reach down and touch their toes, we're talking different improvements where you're increasing their range of motion.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know, I've got a guy I just started training not that long ago, and we're just trying to get him into a full squat still. So we're doing barbell sets, just working down until he can do it without his back caving in. Different measures, but my ultimate one for long-term training is volume load. More good work done.
Go out and do more good work. Maybe that's where we should end it. Because I think I don't have anything else. I don't know if you do.
I got a good quote from a client this morning. We were discussing his weight on his bench press today, and we were so we do a kind of a makeshift earthquake bar. So you can go out and spend $700 on what's called an earthquake bar, and it's a wobbly bar that helps with shoulder stability. It's kind of an advanced technique. Or you can put a kettlebell on a band and hang it on the bar, and it does the same thing. So we were doing that, and he was kind of struggling on the third sets, and we had 4 sets. And I said, well, do I need to pull back for the last set? And we were kind of just going over what he'd be able to do for his last set. And he said, he says, no, this is appropriately really hard. Or he said, appropriately really difficult. And I was like, that's exactly the goal of training right there. Appropriately really difficult. And if your trainer's not giving you appropriately really difficult every time, keyword appropriately yes. Really difficult every time, then again, they're out for themselves. It's their own ego. Who can they crush today? I thought that was a good quote. I'm going to write a book, Appropriately Really Difficult, the guide to picking a good trainer.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we've given people a good start of picking a trainer, or a good start on at least how not to hurt themselves, what not to do. And from there, being able to be more mindful about crafting their own routines for better general health.
Yeah, I think a lot of trainers could benefit from these kind of talks too. And I really enjoyed mentoring other trainers, and the way the business is set up right now, it doesn't give me much opportunity to do that. So I really like this path of thought, because it's beneficial to everybody. It's beneficial to the client, to the trainer, which is ultimately beneficial to the general public, because we just need a more healthy public. That should be number one goal in a lot of everything that we have going on, is creating a physically and mentally healthy society right now. And we're going in the exact opposite direction. We're getting physically and mentally less healthy as time goes on.
Yep. And that's it. Obesity is probably the number. I'm pretty sure it's the number one comorbidity for in the US.
For were you talking about comorbidity for COVID?
For pretty much anything.
Yeah.
That for pretty much anything, you see it pop up a lot. Yeah. So when it comes to heart disease, which I think is still the number one killer in the US, but I'm not sure.
Heart disease is number one. Yes.
Yeah. So when it comes to heart disease for sure. But then things like COVID, it makes you more susceptible, all manner of diseases and sicknesses. So you should care about your weight, but then you should also care about, and this is something we kind of gripe on a lot, and what we were talking a lot today about is, when you're exercising, it shouldn't just be for those aesthetics. Those are important to our mental health, and then a good body composition is important to overall health. But you want good movement. That's what that was one of the first things you taught me is to don't train exercises, program movements. Okay,
Mhm.
because you want good movement, you should care about that, because as we get older, that that good quality movement is what allows us to stay independent longer. And as we get older, one of our biggest dangers is falls. Okay,
Mhm.
so if you can't move well, you're more susceptible to falling down. If you're more susceptible to falling down, then you're more susceptible to an injury that will literally end your life.
Well, let me talk about obesity for a second, and then I got an actual anecdote from the gym this last couple of weeks. But obesity is second in comorbidity. First is age.
Hmm.
The older you get, the more likely you are to die. That
Funny how that works.
that's the Yogi Berra health quote right there. The older you get, the more likely you are to die. Obesity is probably second. Obesity is the most recent, I think it was 2015, 2016, somewhere around there, was costing close to $3 billion as a strain on the healthcare system. So we want to talk about fixing healthcare in the country. Don't even talk to me about universal healthcare or privatized healthcare or anything, because we would fix it better regardless of those two methods if we reduce the obesity rate. Because if we could get that down 50%, we could get the burden on our healthcare system down 50%. Insurance works because you're sharing risk. If you're sharing risk with people that are risky, the burden is going to be higher. And the United States is getting older and fatter. And that's not a good combination for that,
No.
for any system. It doesn't matter which system it is. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, the numbers coming out of quarantine, this year-long 3 weeks to flatten the curve, is
Careful.
six out of 10 people. No, I'm speaking specifically to physical health here, or I guess disease is physical health, but physical fitness. 6 out of 10 people are reporting a 30 or more pound weight increase over this time. So how much have we increased that burden this last year? So we were already close to $3 billion on the healthcare system. 6 out of 10 people are more obese than they were when this started. How much did we increase that strain? And God, I forgot where I was going with that.
Well, where I'll go with it is this is why we're ranting about these things today, is because if you want to be able to address that, then you have to train properly. Because if you're not training properly, if you're trying to kill yourself, or if you're training with someone who's trying to kill you, then you're gonna burn out, you're gonna hurt yourself, you're not gonna be able to achieve those goals, either because you can't, because you're hurt, or because you say, forget it, this isn't worth it.
Okay, I know where I was going, but the obesity is a strain on the entire country, and we need to get there. So, to your point of moving better being the main goal, and et cetera, the main goal is what's the biggest problem. If someone is 500 pounds, the main goal is get that fat off their body. So they're not even going to be able to move well until you
Yes.
get that fat off their body.
Yes.
So now you've got to key in on diet. You've got to get them just up and moving. Don't worry about how they move as much. So get them moving and reduce their calorie intake until 300 of that is off. And
I
now
can't
we
get
can
you to
start
squat properly if I can't even get you to walk into the gym properly.
Exactly. The first movement pattern that we all need to master is crawling. Then the second one is walking. And so we can progress that and worry about the weight first, because that's the most pressing goal. Someone who has been anorexic for a long time and is finally getting their diet back in order, the opposite case. We need to put muscle mass on them. So the first order of business is getting good weight on their body, muscle and bone mass, because that's going to be depleted for years of anorexia. So whatever the goal is what's the biggest problem. But anecdote from the gym, and if any young trainers come across this, you have to earn this to say what I'm about to say. But I just had an injury in the gym, and one you can call a win. So my injury rate is almost non-existent. But this one we had a slight injury. She was doing box step ups and she didn't quite step off the box all the way and clipped her foot and fell down backwards over the top with weights in her hands. And her head rebounded off the ground, and it looked pretty bad. I dropped everything, ran over there, was worried about her head, but she was grabbing her ankle and she had twisted her ankle. And the end result of that big fall off an 18-inch box was a minor sprain of the ankle. So a week off and a little bit of compression and ice, and she's good to go. So a minor sprain. So just a stretching of the ligament. That's it. It wasn't completely damaged. That same client 8 years ago when we started training was osteoporotic, nervous system disorder. So she was basically falling, just walking, and everything along the line. So for a client that started where she was from, that fall might have been the last injury she ever had in her life. Not because the fall killed her, but because the fact that she would have been so broken from it. She would have declined in a bed or in a hospital bed or something like that. So that's an injury I can call a win, but you have to earn that right.
Yeah.
You know, we got out of that major incident with just a minor sprain, an inconvenience. But because she spent the last 8 years very progressively building that system up to be robust. And I'd like to say a little good guidance along the way, but a lot of consistency and hard work on her part.
What was it? The appropriate amount of hard work?
Mm-hmm. Appropriately really difficult.
Appropriately really difficult. Go out and be appropriately really difficult. That's a good place to end it.
All right. Sounds good.